No. Simon Watts, Christchurch Coastal. Oh no, I thought they went. Oh yeah, they are coming. Okay, yes, please come forward. Simon Watts. Oh, he's come early. Thanks for coming early. Sorry, that's why I got confused. But thank you very much. We've got a couple of councillors that have to head away to another meeting, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, Mayor, thank you very much for this opportunity.
That's page 185 on your agenda.
Okay. I have a plan to talk for less than 6 minutes. After this, oh, hang on, let's put that up. Oh, okay. After this first slide, I have only 5 other slides, and hopefully we have time for questions. As I walk through, I'm going to highlight some of the aspects of the CCRU submission, and at the end, I will summarise them. A point of clarity, I am a member of the HAL team, but I'm not representing them at the moment. I'm a realist, but acknowledge, rather like I guess you do, that and maybe the council and even the government, I am not neutral. I am an academic, I will stay with the facts, but I think it's important we recognise that nobody is neutral in this. Unfortunately, there's a typographical error in the documents you have. I talk about the residential unit overlay at a couple of points, and instead of abbreviating it to RUO, your document have RDO on, for which I apologise. I suppose, from my perspective, the council and the communities are going to have to be doing things rather differently in the future, maybe than the way we have done. And so this is, if you like, reflections on not only the long-term plan, but what the implications will be going forward. Okay, there's an OECD definition of resilient communities at the top there. The policy guidance urges communities to become resilient, and councils are required to support the process of communities becoming resilient. Resilient cities are comprised of resilient communities, and Christchurch has joined the 100 Resilient Cities organisation. So, looking at this LTP, I don't believe this council is supporting resilience in the East. Why do I think that? And our submission defines this, there is uncertainty around infrastructure funding in the LTP and around council processes. Outside of the LTP, other ways that resilience is not supported is public statements by officers and sometimes councillors about why infrastructure should not go into certain places. And finally, potential unequal treatment of suburbs. Let's face it, if it weren't for flood defences, most of Christchurch would be in a high flood zone. Where are we now? I won't bore you with the data, a lot of it is your own. The brunt of the earthquake damage is in the coastal and eastern suburbs. If you go to a doctor and you have a broken leg, actually you expect the doctor to look at your leg and not after 1 minute start looking at your arms and your ears. I think geographically, equal split of resources is not appropriate in this situation, and we note from the LTP there appears to be no further funding for South Shore and South New Brighton. These are not shattered ex-communities. I know many of you know these communities, but they are communities that are trying to rebuild and become resilient. Some areas are having a lot of problems because the planning regulations around the high flood management zones, we are advised and believe are being misapplied in those areas where the residential unit overlay also exists. The residential unit overlay has effectively a presumption of development and mitigation, whereas the high flood zone is required to avoid, and therefore effectively there's not a presumption of development. Other things on our mind day to day, there's a lot of concern about botched earthquake repairs to people's houses. We're concerned about botched demolitions along the estuary edge, which have resulted in damage along the estuary edge, increasing the risk of flooding. Nothing to do with climate change, but the council seem to be concatenating climate change with this non-climate change damage. Adaptive management, you know what this is. It's short-term actions that give long-term options, especially important in a situation where we have unknown unknowns. Now that has big implications for you and for us. For you, if I read the guidance correctly, you've got to produce adaptive district plans and adaptive long-term plans. And for communities, it has implications because community engagement has to go up a number of notches where I don't think it's really been before. I don't believe this long-term plan is adaptive, and that's not a criticism, it's simply an observation. We are expecting, going forward, that community and council together agree triggers and agree process. That's what adaptive management is. And we expect the council to be thinking and planning in this framework. From the community side, we expect to be helping you and teaming with you. Lack of infrastructure now means that ultimately communities are starved out. Retreat before it's shown to be necessary is maladaptation, which is not the way that anybody wants to go. If managed retreat is necessary, this is the last action. What we do now doesn't only affect now, but it affects tomorrow. Final slide. Community engagement, the Houting, spectacular initiative and a very exciting initiative. It does mean that communities and council will need to work more closely together, which means hopefully council get more information, but it does mean they're likely to be held more accountable. For instance, stormwater discharge in South Shore. The communities have experts, the council have experts. Neither are less biased than the other. Transparency and conversation among equals is required. A question, where did the OSO report go? This was a community funded professional report, and I don't know where it went. You have a number of what I would call aspirations in your plan, enabling active citizenship. There's a list of them, and the submission that we have given you has a detail where at least 3 of them, maximising opportunities, increasing active public shared transport. In the East, I don't see how they can work because of what's in the long-term plan. I think aspirations, which is talking the talk, are easier than commitment, which is walking the walk, which is harder. But we do this together. And we remember in that process that everything is important. I'm hoping, I haven't got a clock there, I'm hoping that I've left 4 or 5 minutes for questions. Thank you.
No, you haven't.
Sorry?
No, you've come to the pretty much towards the end of the process, but yeah, I'll take David because it is his patch.
Thank you. Is it your belief then that if we, through some consultation with both council and communities, come up with an infrastructure strategy along the estuary edge, that we would in fact overcome a lot of the overlay problems that are causing resource consenting issues in South Ryde, South Shore and South Ryde?
This is my opinion. I actually believe that the consenting issues are around the non-application of the residential unit overlay. There's been a fairly clear decision by the Environment Court on this, or a commission rather, and I don't understand why, according to that commission outcome, that the RDO rules aren't, that they should be more important than the high flood zone rules. So I think that's the core of the consenting problem.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I mean, there's obviously stuff that you've raised in the presentation that you've given today that requires a bit more consideration. So thank you very much, and thank you for being part of the How team. I haven't connected with it yet, but I think it's such a great model for you know, developing a conversation with the community in a very open and transparent way. So thank you for being involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.